Welcome back, Waynesider faithful, to the place where we don't just watch the story unfold, we feel it in our bones. Tonight, we're diving into a narrative so deeply personal, so profoundly layered with history and pain, that it transcends the squared circle. This is about more than a match, it is about the very soul of a dynasty. We are talking about the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, and the seismic shockwave that has just rocked his island of relevancy to its very core. For years, we have watched this man carry the weight of an entire era on his broad shoulders, a solitary figure reigning over all he surveys with a quiet, terrifying authority. The power he wields is absolute, but it has always come at a cost, a psychic tax paid in the currency of isolation and the constant, gnawing pressure to remain the one and only head of the table. That pressure has been mounting, a silent scream building behind the calm facade of the champion. We saw it in the subtle cracks during the feud with Jey Uso, a war that was never about titles but about the very heart of what it means to be family. We heard it in the whispered threats to Solo Sikoa, a reminder that loyalty is not a given, it is a currency that must be constantly earned. Roman's world has been a gilded cage of his own making, a kingdom where every smile could hide a dagger and every show of respect could be a prelude to a challenge. He has ruled not just with an iron fist, but with the exhausting paranoia of a man who knows his throne is built on a foundation of fractured bonds and silent resentment. The silence around him has been deafening, a vacuum waiting to be filled. And into that vacuum stepped not a challenger, but a hurricane. The arrival of Jacob Fatu was not merely a new debut, it was the arrival of a specter that has haunted the bloodline saga from the very beginning. Here was a force of nature, a man whose reputation for sheer, unadulterated violence preceded him, a living weapon forged in the same fires as the Usos and Solo. His very presence on SmackDown was a question mark hanging over Roman's head. Would he be the final, most devastating piece of the bloodline puzzle, the enforcer to end all enforcers, solidifying Roman's reign for the next decade? Or was he something else entirely, a wild card that not even the tribal chief could control? Please like, share and subscribe for more WWE content. For a brief, shimmering moment, it seemed the former was true. The sheer awe of his debut, the visceral impact of his offense, felt like a coronation of a new era of dominance. It felt like the family, at long last, was truly whole, with its most dangerous son finally answering the call. The narrative was writing itself. The bloodline, stronger than ever, an immovable object ready to crush any and all opposition. The collective sigh from the WWE universe was one of resigned acceptance, the reign was truly never going to end. But in this story, nothing is ever that simple. The foundation was already cracked, and the most devastating blows always come from within. The attack was not a frontal assault, it was an execution. It came not from the declared enemies, Braun Breaker and the bruising faction of Bronson Reeds, but from the shadow he was supposed to command. As Breaker and his cohorts provided the distraction, a chaotic maelstrom of violence, the real story unfolded in the periphery. Jacob Fatu stood, a statue of impending doom, his eyes not on the enemy, but fixed on the tribal chief. And then, the world stopped. The move was not a spear, not a superkick, it was something more primal, more devastating in its finality. It was a betrayal written in the language of pure violence, a statement that echoed through the arena in a moment of deafening silence. The emotional aftermath was a portrait painted in shock. Roman Reigns, the invincible champion, was not just down, he was broken. This was not the physical pain of a lost match, this was the spiritual desecration of a king dethroned by his own blood. The camera lingered on his face, and for the first time in years, we did not see a god or a chief, we saw a man, utterly and completely betrayed. The veil of invincibility was torn away, revealing the raw, human core of a leader who had just lost everything. His power, his aura, his control, it all evaporated in the wake of that single, shattering moment. The island of relevancy had been flooded by a tidal wave of treachery. And then, the real horror set in. This was not a solo mission. This was a coup. As Jacob stood over the fallen chief, he was not alone. Solo Sikoa, the enforcer, the silent shield, did not move to defend his cousin. He simply watched, a new, cold authority in his eyes. This was coordinated. This was planned. The whispers backstage immediately began to swirl, a cacophony of shock and grim realization. This wasn't a random act of rebellion. This was a carefully orchestrated takeover. The question on everyone's lips was a terrifying one. Who gave the order? Was this Solo's play for power, using his own brother as the ultimate weapon? Or was this a directive from somewhere even higher, from the elders, from the family itself, deciding that a new, more vicious tribal chief was required? The symbolism is crushing. Jacob Fatu, the one who was kept away, the one whose path was different, has returned not as a savior but as a destroyer. He is the embodiment of every suppressed resentment, every jealous whisper, every bit of bitterness that festered outside the glow of Roman's spotlight. His violence is not for the empire, it is for the demolition of that empire. He is the consequence of Roman's absolute rule, the monster that was created in the shadows of the tribe's success. This attack was a message written in blood. Your reign was built on family, and it will be destroyed by family. The real backstage whispers now point to a civil war of unimaginable scale. This is no longer a rift, this is a chasm. On one side, a wounded Roman reigns, possibly with the Usos by his side, representing the established order, the champion who carried the family to unprecedented heights. On the other, Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, a new regime of ruthless, unfeeling violence, perhaps believing they are saving the family from Roman's ego by taking it back to its most brutal roots. This is a battle for the soul of the Anoa dynasty, a tragedy playing out on the world's stage. What this means for the family's legacy is now shrouded in uncertainty. The Bloodline story was the greatest WWE narrative in a generation precisely because it was rooted in real family history and emotion. It celebrated their dominance. Now, it threatens to expose their deepest fractures for all the world to see. This is no longer a story about winning and losing championships, it is a Shakespearean tragedy about power, ambition, and the corrosive nature of betrayal. The legacy is no longer just about glory, it is about the price of that glory. In the end, this is a story about broken trust. It is about the unspoken contract of blood, the belief that family will always have your back, that the bond is thicker than ambition. Roman Reigns built an entire worldview on that principle, and in an instant, it was proven to be a beautiful, devastating lie. The throne is empty, and the war for it will be the most emotionally charged, heart-wrenching story we have ever witnessed. It is a story that will leave scars long after the final bell has rung.